You're asking me a question I haven't studied, so I don't know. I can't answer that question. I know that presidents can come up with lots of excuses, so can, speakers of the House and people like that can come up with lots of excuses for doing what they do, but I can't answer that question. I don't know.
This is Brian.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Oh, great, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay this morning. It's a nice, cool morning in the mountains.
Oh, yeah, it is down here in Statesville, too.
My husband said there was about a 3-minute hard shower, which, and then right after that, it just cooled off up here last night.
Yeah, we're certainly glad it's cooler down here as well. Hopefully it will be in Washington when we're up there here in a few weeks, spending some time with you.
We're looking forward to it. It's been miserably hot up there this week.
Yeah, we're looking forward to coming up. We're going to come up next Sunday, and we really do appreciate you having us there as a guest, Ms. Fox.
Good. Well, I'm glad for it too. Thank you.
Mrs. Fox, there was a Associated Press article here I was reading before you came on, and I'm sure you've seen this. The budget deficit tops $1 trillion for the first time. Isn't this a very ominous sign as to where our nation is headed financially?
Oh, I think it is a very scary thing. In fact, the predictions are that the deficit will hit $2 trillion before the end of the year because of the way the spending is going in the Congress. It's sort of like a snowball. It sort of picks up momentum. It is a frightening situation. When George Bush left office, the deficit was $454 billion. It only took about 6 months for them to double the deficit, and it's going to take only another 3 months to double it again. That should scare people. And, the people are scared.
Yes.
Everywhere I go, people tell me that. Carl Rove met with a group of us about 3 weeks ago, and he said that one of the things that has struck him the most in his travels over the last couple of months has been that everywhere he goes, he says he was living in airplanes and living, from plane to plane, airports and planes, because he's traveling a lot. And he said everywhere he goes, people are coming up to him and saying, "I am frightened to death for my country." And I am. I am too. Every time I look around every day that Congress meets, I am frightened. I heard on the news this morning that the senators are going to drop the card check provision out of the card check bill and just leave it with the binding arbitration. And even Mike Huckabee said, "Oh, that's great news." That's terrible news. It's terrible news because the binding arbitration piece of that bill is worse than the card check bill. And so this is a plan on the part of the unions. They put that together hoping that there would be so much furor over the card check piece that everybody would get upset with that and think, well, if the card check gets dropped off and we're left with binding arbitration, that the bill is okay. That's just not the case. We've got a bait and switch thing going on every day in Congress. They come out with the worst possible thing you can think of, and then they drop a couple of the worst things, and everybody thinks what's left is great. That is wrong. It is not that way. They're putting together, as somebody said yesterday, we couldn't have imagined that they would put together a health care bill that would be as bad as this health care bill. I mean, everything about it is bad. And so the goal, again, is to have it so bad that if they modify just one or say, oh, wow, now this will be okay. But people can't be fooled by that bait and switch situation that we've got. And we've got to keep people alert to that and get people to really read the bills and not just go on what you're hearing in the media. The media people don't read the bills, for heaven's sakes. They just take at face value what they're told by the Democrats. I should tell you, let me give you a couple of other figures. I didn't bring these papers up with me, but I just opened up my computer. As of June 30, the national debt stood at $11.5 trillion. That is $37,609.23 for every man, woman, and child in America. During the month of June alone, the national debt increased by $223.7 billion. That's $7.5 billion a day, $310.7 million an hour. We spent $18 billion just on interest in June. Just interest. The debt has increased $2.9 trillion since the Democrats took control of Congress on January 3, 2007. One of the things that the Democrats keep doing, and they did it on the floor yesterday, I handled a rule for what was a fairly innocuous bill. It's probably not going to pass the Senate. It passed the House last year. It's called Save Our Wild Mustangs bill or something like that. It's having to do with wild horses and burros in the West. And they brought it up yesterday under a rule because they didn't have anything for us to vote on, and they were keeping the Ways and Means Committee in town so that they kept everybody in town, because if they hadn't, the committee would have gone home too, and they didn't want them to do that. So we had this bill, and so I brought up all these numbers, and it really got under the skin of the Democrats. Then they just started saying, well, it's all George Bush's fault. It's all George Bush's fault. He dug this ditch deep. Well, when the Republicans were in charge of Congress, and Republicans weren't perfect, they made a lot of mistakes, but when George Bush was president and Republicans were in charge of Congress, we weren't facing this kind of situation. The minute the Democrats took over Congress in January of 2007, our economy started going to hell. We had 54 straight months of job creations. Never in the history of this country have we had that under Bush and a Republican Congress. The Democrats take control and it all goes to pot. And they want to blame it all on George Bush. They're going to be blaming bad things on George Bush for the next 300 years, I would say, if we let them get by with it. But this economy is all the result of people understanding that Democrats are going to tax and spend, and that is bad public.
We're coming up on a break, Ms. Foxx. If you can stay with us through this break, we would like to ask you two more questions, and I know you're busy, and we really do appreciate you joining us each week and answering some of the more difficult questions. We could go ahead and a question I was going to ask you, and you can think about it during the break. Well, we're coming up on a break. We will be back with Ms. Foxx in 3 minutes. You're listening to The Real News with Farron and Brian.
The United States virtually has no reason whatsoever any longer to remain in the United States, given, laws and regulations left and right. And here we are on the verge of the cap and trade legislation. Could you go into that a little bit? Sure.
Cap and trade will destroy between 1.5 and 4 million jobs a year. And it's going to do that in lots of different ways.